Hi guys, welcome back. So is it time for revolution? How do you fix English rugby? Now, we had to do a follow-up video on the collapse of London Irish, the professional team, their suspension from all leagues, obviously including the Premiership. Now, I did say London Irish Amateur are alive and well and they can carry on playing at the London Irish training ground, and there was a statement released from them confirming this, so that's really good news. If you want to carry on supporting London Irish, you can. The ethos is alive and well. I've got some personal experience from London Irish Amateur. They're a great club, so get down them and support them for next season. That would be great. So the ethos isn't dead, but the professional team pretty much is. Of course, we lost Wasps, we lost Worcester, and also let's not forget London Welsh, obviously a while ago now. I think I actually played London Welsh at London Welsh once, but I just can't for the life of me remember what situation that was in. But anyway, that was sad as well. Plus, we had the whole debacle of Saracens, the scandal there, their relegation. So English rugby is in a mess. It's at its all-time low for sure. So where do we go from here? That is the question. And your comments were fantastic once again. And just for the benefit, if you don't read through the comment section, which, I mean, why don't you? But I'm going to go through some of the best suggestions. I'm not going to mention everyone's name. Some people made lots of similar suggestions, but I'm kind of going to mention one name that mentioned the main points. So I'm going to go through those. Also, interestingly, since the last video, the owner, or should I say ex-owner of London Irish, Mick Crosnan, has come out with his own statement, obviously wanting to put his own side of the story over. Now, I'm not taking sides, I'm not apportioning blame here because it's too late, it's happened. The question is, what next? But what was interesting from his open letter was, no, he wasn't really prepared to or able to lose multiple millions a year. Now, that really is the crux of the matter, the problem with the system. It's kind of like the English football system where you need backers, you need big money men coming in who are willing to lose multiple millions a year. Occasionally a rugby team breaks even. I know Exeter have done that in the past, but a lot of the time you're losing money and there just isn't those people around or those consortiums around who are willing to do that like they are in football. So something has to change. The question is, what? Now, no shortage of great suggestions here, so let's get straight into it. Like I said, I'm going to mention some names, but that doesn't mean others mention the same or similar things. So let's get into it, starting off with Bradley Cooper, a valued regular contributor, and he suggests a really interesting radical plan that English clubs should scrap the Premiership altogether and join the URC, the United Rugby Championship. Now, initially that seems a bit crazy, a bit maybe over the top, but when you think about it, is it? I mean, we've had the PGA coming out and joining the Saudi investment fund, if you like, Live Golf. I'm not saying I'm relating anybody to that, but it's the kind of shock revelation, the shock merger that could happen. Could the English clubs go all in and go in with the URC and actually scrap the Premiership altogether? It would be a huge competition, the biggest club competition maybe in the world, dwarfing the French, dwarfing Super Rugby, dwarfing the Japanese model, which has been going pretty well. You know, there'll probably be multiple leagues and playoffs and all that sorts of thing. Could it work? English clubs going into the URC, maybe not as crazy as it initially sounds. So thank you, Bradley, for that suggestion, and plenty others did suggest similar. On to Andrew Perkin. He's saying maybe clubs should follow the Barcelona Football Club model and have either full or partial community ownership. So the community, the fans, if you like, have a stake in the club and a seat at that board, that executive table to oversee the internal workings of the club and hopefully stopping them doing rash things maybe. That's interesting. On to 101 Mighty Joe, and one of the most common suggestions, and that is the RFU providing some sort of central contracting to a group of players, a group of core England players, and then the clubs picking up the rest so they share the financial burden. Obviously, England would then have more control over the player, so maybe better for the national team as well. Now, he said that Ireland managed to do it and still turn over a decent profit, so why can't England? Although many pointed out that the RFU isn't exactly flush with cash as many of us think. Could they really stomach that financial burden? But then plenty of other countries do it. So Should there be some sort of central contracting? It seems a popular idea. I think it's a pretty good idea. I think it might be the time to do it. Now there's a smaller group of clubs as well. Maybe it's a bit easier to do. On to Mark and a suggestion from a rugby league point of view that a lower salary cap may be needed. That helps clubs stay afloat in rugby league. And maybe English clubs have been inflating their wages they're offering just to try and compete with France and Japan especially. And maybe they just can't, and they need to realise they need to actually spend a lot less and let the more expensive players go abroad. Now, for me, I think this one really does have legs. If you do that, maybe you let young English talent come through the system. Then when they become more expensive, those foreign clubs can take the burden. If you did do this, the RFU would simply have to change, their selection policy where you could select England players from abroad. So I think those would have to go hand in hand. But if there is a time to do it, I think now is it, so I think that's a very good suggestion. On to dazzing and a suggestion that comes up quite a lot, and that is limiting the amount of foreign players allowed to play in the English clubs, which is maybe blocking the way through for young English players. So many sports have done this in the past and still do it, limiting the number of foreign players in a team, so maybe that is the time to do this now. Gavin Denton makes a great point that maybe you should get rid of this idea of the marquee player, and I'm all behind this one. It is a strange one, having marquee player exceptions to the salary cap, because it kind of means what's the point of a salary cap? It lets clubs with more money spend more money, but then what's the point of a salary cap if you can then spend as much as you want on one or two players? So, and also it would stop clubs getting in big trouble, and also it might even up the league a bit more as well. So I think getting rid of that marquee player allowance might be a good one to go. Let me know if you disagree with that. On to undefined. They make an interesting point that actually 10 teams in a domestic league may simply be too few, and it's just not meaningful. You're playing the same teams again and again, or there's just not enough games. And he makes an interesting point that TV rights would be affected. Would BT Sport want to renew their deal altogether or put in a much lower offer? Indeed, I saw an article today suggesting BT Sport are asking for a rebate because there's less teams in the Premiership. I mean, 10 teams may sound like it's easier to manage financially, but if you're not bringing in as much money, then it cancels each other out. On to Ewan, and he makes an interesting suggestion of moving the season. Now, I've heard this one before, and there's some good arguments behind it. The conditions may be better for fast-paced, attractive rugby, if that's the sort of thing you like. Obviously, it's subjective. And also, I think a good point is it stops the domestic league clashing with the Six Nations, because when Premiership players go and play in the Six Nations for all sorts of nations, then the Premiership really suffers. There's much less interest. I think it has a really big impact on the clubs, and if you can get rid of that clash, I think that would be a good thing. And I guess you keep the domestic season as it is. Do you think that's a goer? Is there anything that's a big drawback to that? Graham Morgan makes a great point, maybe another suggestion, but the arrival of CVC hasn't really increased the Premiership. We've seen all these problems. I'm not saying they're caused by CVC, but they were meant to increase the revenue of the Premiership, increase certainly the marketing of the Premiership. If there's a time to step up, CVC need to step up. So now is the time to see if it's worth having them, or was it a big mistake selling off such a big stake? And many made the suggestion that the RFU Executive Board, Premiership Rugby need to have a restructure or even a clean sweep. I don't know if that improves the situation or it's just scapegoating, I don't know, but certainly plenty suggesting that this problem was created right at the beginning of professionalism, where the RFU wiped their hands of it and gave it over to private owners, and it's built up and up and up, and it's obviously boiled over. Anyway, guys, so many great suggestions. Let me know which ones you like, which ones you think are goers, and which ones you think just wouldn't work. Get in the comments below as always, and I'll catch you next time.